growing and pushing like that was the best lessons I've ever learned in my life. People that I thought were completely irreplaceable and, running operations or running finances, that aren't here anymore. And now our business is, far more profitable. We're running more efficient. Um, you just learn so many valuable lessons over those years, which I'm curious to know, like, where do you think most business owners in our industry specifically fall? Like, where would be their weaknesses, or where do you see other business owners and you go, I think that's what you're doing wrong? For me, it was putting too much trust into the wrong people, and that's my fault, not theirs. That's mine.
I would say two primary things. First one would be people. I fought it to get people for cheap. And finally, I just gave up and said, I'm going to have to spend more money, right? If you want good people and you want to win. And we recently implemented traction in our business, and we went through and evaluated every team member to the greatest to the worst. It's a hard conversation. And then you take your greatest and you say, okay, well, what's the attributes of the greatest from the office to the field, all the foremans, everybody? And you take those, say 5, and you say, okay, well, what's their attributes? Because if you could multiply those 5, you could take on anything in this world. And it really comes down to a whole list. But when we looked at every person, their number one attribute of why they're so great is they never make excuses. So then that become a core value and a filter for how we hire people. And if we hire people and you're in an interview and you start making excuses about what happened at the last place, 9 times out of 10, we ain't messing with you. Because you're going to come here and make excuses, right? We don't want excuses. So it doesn't matter if we fail. It doesn't matter if the GC sucks, because most of them do nowadays. And you use that as an excuse. Like, it's just an excuse. It doesn't matter.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Expo Connect podcast. I am your host, Taylor White. This podcast is brought to you by our amazing friends over at Komatsu. As always, with me today, I have somebody that we were actually just talking about the weather and the differences going on. Luke has a popular song called Ain't No Love in Oklahoma. This guy's from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Thank you, Bret Barnhart, for coming on today, man.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, you like that Luke Combs plug? You ever listen to that song?
Oh, yeah.
Does it fire you up?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You need to go watch the new movie about tornadoes, too.
Yeah. So your business, you guys are in Tulsa, Oklahoma, correct?
Yep.
So twisters and stuff, like, are you in that alley? Like, is that, like, do you get crazy storms where you are?
Yeah. So Turner Turnpike, which goes from Oklahoma City to Tulsa, pretty much is like Tornado Alley.
Wow.
I don't know why, but that's Stroud Mall got hit when I was a kid. I mean, if there's a tornado, it typically is coming from Oklahoma City to Tulsa.
So do you, like, is it common for people to have, like, tornado bunkers in their house and stuff like that? Like a place to go?
Yep. Yeah, we got a safe room. Actually, we're building a new office, and the safe room's coming today for the office.
Oh, like at your office, you have to have one too?
We don't have to, but we're doing it.
Something to do.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So kind of interesting. When I first started, I had a backhoe, and I would go around and dig storm shelter holes. And you literally pour concrete, set a steel shelter in it, and encase it in concrete. It's got a set of stairs that go down into it.
No way.
For a company called Tornado King. So my dad did it. He quit doing it. And then I called the customer and picked him up and started traveling all over Oklahoma doing it. And then now today, what you see a lot is like the one coming to the office, 6x8 steel structure and hilted into the concrete. And it's rated for like an F5.
Holy.
So, yeah.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess we're getting off topic talking about tornadoes, but I like that. So Barnhart Excavating. So from what I can gather, a pretty interesting story. And I actually was kind of diving into your About Us on your website. You started in the 1930s by your great grandfather and like started with like mules and stuff. Like,
yep.
That is congratulations, by the way, on having a business that has, succeeded that long. It's not easy. I mean, you get family, you get economy, and you get a bunch of different, stuff going on there. So big ups to you guys and your family for making it this far. Give us a bit of the background information on Barnhart Excavating.
Yeah, so a little more to that even with my great grandfather. So the area that we're in was big oil and gas production. So everything up until the 80s when the oil crunched was mainly oil field work. So first generation, he started that mules and slips, and the story goes from our grandpa that the guy come in town with some dozers, and of course he still had mules and slips. And there's a local town drum right where this guy come from, and he went home and told my grandma, he said, "I got to buy him out. If I don't buy him out, I'm gonna go out of business with these mules." So, anyways, we've kind of talked to. Of course, my grandpa's passed now, but they couldn't keep undercarriage on those old machines. I mean, he'd continually run off of them. They'd use floats and winch trucks, and their trucks wasn't even stout enough to pull them up a hill. So if they hit a big hill, they would drop, unload, drive the truck and the trailer, drive the dozer up the hill, reload it, and go back. So, anyways, carried on. My great grandpa was county commissioner here too, as well with the business. And then my grandpa took over his business, bought him out, and then his brother started a business as well. So there was two brothers, same town, same type of work, separate businesses.
I'm sure that was interesting.
Yeah. So my family they won't give you anything. You buy them out or start your own. And then my dad started right out of high school, and him and his brother were partners. That lasted about 10 years. That split. So then now I have my uncle, my dad, my grandpa, all in business, and his brother, my grandpa's brother, in business, pretty much same town, all Barnharts. And everybody names it with your last name because everybody knows us, right? So it gets really confusing. So, anyways, my dad just pretty much slowed down to doing very little. Him and my mom's doing some other stuff. My uncle still does a little bit of work. He's basically in a septic business. Him and one guy, and then of course my grandpa's passed, and he sold his business to a developer in Tulsa. And then for me, so going back, I worked for the family. I either worked in the hayfield on the ranch of my grandpa's or with my dad. Um, got out of school, knew I didn't want to go to college, and worked for him for $10 an hour, saved up $1,500, and basically had the conversation of like, you can't survive working for me, so you probably need to figure out what you're going to do. RPO'd a 580 Super M backhoe, bought a 83 Ford 9000 and a trailer from him for 14 grand. His little single axle dump bed truck and an old bell sheet trailer, spindle hitch, and went to work. And that RPO was saving up money for my down payment because I didn't have any money. So he co-signed with me on that backhoe, and then carried the note on the truck and trailer, and I went to work. I dug for a lot of plumbers, electricians, and then, of course, the storm shelter. I picked that back up because my dad had quit doing that, and I knew that guy from working with him as a kid. Picked that up and just started doing that. I pretty much had my own client base within about a year. I helped him, kind of subbed under him. I had my own client base, and then I don't know. I just got to a point where I was trading time for dollars. I mean, I was no different than an hourly employee, and nobody did utilities. So going back, oil and gas is what they done. And then when that dropped, my dad got into residential, and then he dug for plumbers and electricians with send backhoes all over town. And I just didn't want to do that because, like I said, I was $55 an hour at that point. And basically, I could tell you how much money I could make in a year working 7 days a week, 14-hour days. And it's like, I gotta do something different. So started getting into utilities. I didn't know anything about it. None of my family had done it. And I just started asking people questions. And it's kind of funny. I laugh about it now. A guy hired me to fix a fire hydrant, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I went out there and dug the entire fire hydrant up. And I called the water supply store, and I told him what was happening. He said, "Well, just take the bonnet cap off and pull it out. That plunger's probably just filthy." I said, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "I dug the whole thing up. I'm ready to tear the hydrant out." And he said, "You don't need to do that." So ended up getting it fixed, and just started picking up utilities, learning. Didn't know how to estimate because my family didn't do estimating or anything. They didn't have any software. It was a lot of hourly work. So did that, got into some municipal work, and then picked up a 9-year federal contract. So we did a lot of negotiated federal work for about 9 years. And then now today, rolling out of that contract, we do a lot of commercial, bigger residential. some municipal work, and then obviously we'll do federal work if it works out. That's a whole different animal.
That's a good array of like when I hear that, I hear like that's good cash flow because like for us, obviously cash flow in construction, sometimes sucks, especially with us in the wintertime. But what I really like, and people are like we've grown in the past 3 or 4 years, and much like stuff, like obviously the bigger jobs are, a lot of the commercial municipal projects, but it's nice hearing that, like you'll do larger residential, like we do residential as well too. And it's nice because, those clients are paying quicker and sometimes that residential helps cash flow the commercial side. Just because you're not waiting on, you're not getting tainages and this and that. But I find interesting, like, is it because your family, I mean, long, family history of entrepreneurs and successful business owners that like, cause you didn't get any post-secondary education. Where did you kind of gather the drive, I guess, and entrepreneurial spirit to be like, okay, I'm going to start my own thing and I want to grow it and I want to do this?
Well, I didn't have a choice once I signed that note. I still remember my dad in that 6-month RPO. He said, every morning you wake up, you better know that you want to do this. Cause when I sign that paper, I ain't bailing you out. It's all you. And I figured it up. I'd make about 70, I think it's about $75,000 that year if I worked those hours because it was hourly. And I was going to have like 60 in the bank. I started with 1,500. I think I did 79,000 that first year. I had about $1,500 in the bank. But I mean, honestly, I didn't know. I didn't know any finance. I didn't know anything about the finance side of things. So I didn't calculate the cost. Right. And you don't realize what the cost and then that lag time of that cash flow and all those things that you got to work through. I didn't do that, but I didn't really have a choice. I grew up working. We worked all the time. I mean, daylight to dark. If we weren't working on jobs, we're working at home. And my dad didn't have mechanics, so we were working on equipment. So I think back to that, and a lot of people talk about like trying to balance their lifestyle and having a work-life balance. And if my dad would have been a 40-hour a week dad, and that's what I grew up seeing, I probably would have struggled building my business. But what it took to get the business on its feet was nothing that I wasn't used to, of working 6, 7 days a week, daylight to dark. It was just our life.
Yeah.
And if I wouldn't have done that, I mean, if I expected to work 40 hours a week, I probably would have never made it because you're always on the verge of bankruptcy I would say for the first 8 years. I mean, one big hiccup when you're trying to grow and rental. I mean, you guys may experience this, but I had to rent after he co-signed once. That was it. So then I'm giving Hertz rental $100,000 a year in rental when I could have went and bought a machine, but I had no credit, And then my first loan, people gripe about the interest rates nowadays. I paid 14% for my first loan.
Wow.
And it was just because I was a high risk, right?
Yeah.
So today we're at 6, 7%. That's half of what I paid day one, but I didn't have a choice. Like you got to figure out how to make it work.
I like that. And a lot of the people listening to you right now, like that is just what it takes, and it's funny because a lot of the conversations that I have with, guys that come on the podcast is we always end up talking about the families and, like work-life balance. And I struggle, heavily with that. Mainly because I generally am just like a workaholic and I grew up with a dad that was gone working all the time. I love what I do. Don't get me wrong. We have family time and we enjoy that, but I like what you say. It's like, this is what I needed to do in order to get it done and like taking a high interest, but like you made it work, and it's not easy, but that's what it takes. Like I have a couple people that I know that, are just starting businesses and you just look at them and you're like, dude, you are not going to last because you're the first guy that wants to leave the office at 4:59 so that your wife's not mad that you're not home by 10 after 5. It's like, dude, that's not the mentality. Like, oh, it's a nice weekend Saturday. Should go to the lake. No, I'm in the pit screening dirt because it's dry. Like that's what it takes. And I love hearing that.
Yeah. It was, I will say it was hard on my marriage early on because my wife come from a family where her dad was home every day at 4:30.
I'm the same. Boat.
Yeah. And then like we had to work through that. So, and I'm like, I'm just working. Like, how is this a bad thing? But I understand her side of it. And then, obviously I'm telling her I'm heading home and I'm heading home towards the shop, and I got to stop the shop, and I'll be home 4 hours later. Yeah. So, anyways,
That is classic though, like I deal with that too. Like even now though, like I mean, we've been around for 58 years, but we just did a massive, explosion in the past 3-4 years during COVID of we leveraged, the 0%, interest rates on machinery. Like we did a lot of buying and purchasing. We bought a new office property. So like these past 3 or 4 years I've been actually the busiest out of my life. I'm 29 now. I first started coming into the business when I was 20, like seriously coming into the business, not just working on site. I've been doing that my whole life. But, you know, these past 3 or 4 years has been so incredibly hard on my marriage and stuff because, like you said, my wife is the same. Her dad worked in kind of financial industry, stock market. So, stock market's 9 to 5. And then after that, it's shut down. There's nothing that, you can do. And it's interesting because with me, like, I'm like, I always said to her, and I get it from her point of view too, because I like what you said resonated was, well, how could you be mad? I'm working. I say that too. I'm like, well, honey, like, look at this guy. Like, we went and hung out there with them on the weekend. He was complaining about how much he hates his job or how much he hates his life. You'd rather listen to that, But it's interesting. But you got to have the right support, I think, in order to run a business. Would you agree with that?
oh yeah, 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 yeah. And I mean, she appreciates it, and she always did, but also needed that time. I will say, you're 20. You say you're 29.
Yeah.
I had some financial goals that I wanted to hit, and I always told her about it. And I think I was 27, 29, and she texted me one day and said, "You hit that goal that you talked about forever." And I never texted her back. And I got home that night, and she said, "You never messaged me back. I figured you'd be excited." And I said, "Honestly, I looked at all the time that I missed with you for that. And then tomorrow, bills are coming in, and that big goal that you wanted will be gone." Right. And one of our core values in the business is no regrets. So trying to live out of that to say, you know what, uh, money is good and money's fun. And I don't think money's a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing. It can tear a lot of families apart if you're not careful. So you got to balance that.
Yeah. 100%. And sometimes, unfortunately, your business kind of just takes president over family, and you got to make that decision and make that call. But and kind of what I was saying before, it's like in the like this winter, we booked Disney with the kids. Like that's the type of stuff. I have 2 young kids, 3 and 1. So it's kind of like they get to see that. It's like, okay, well, dad works and quite a bit, but we also get to go on our family time as well too. But I am interested to know, um, from when you started your business and you started, the $1,500 the first year, you're 70 some odd thousand. Like, if you could sum up like some of your best experiences since you started in business, like what would it be?
Best experiences.
When I say best experiences, in my mind, that could be even like something really bad that happened, but you're like, I just learned the most valuable lesson from this experience.
Well, I would say right off the bat through the struggle, I thought, if my family would pass this down, and this sounds bad as a person when I hear myself say this, if they would just pass this down, it would be so much easier because you've already got your feet under you, you're running. But to look back and say, well, they instilled a value in me and a work ethic, and then to have to go through building it is probably the best thing that you can do, and the pain and the suffering that you have to go through, because you say you understand the value of a dollar, but until you have to stretch every dollar, you don't understand the value of a dollar. Right. So, I don't know. Sometimes my wife and I talk about it, and I got some guys that I kind of help that they're building some businesses, and we talk back and forth and work through things, and I see where they're at. And there's a point between where you start for me and where I'm at today, because you kind of get it where it's really rolling and it's rolling good and everything's just happening. I mean, it can fall apart tomorrow, but there was a point where it was good, but it wasn't where it's at today. And it continues to keep a drive inside of you to keep pushing. And if you're not careful, you can pull back and get on cruise control. right? But there's something about that area right in the middle where you just stay hungry. And it's like, okay, I'm good. I'm safe, but I got to keep the throttle down and you got to keep pressing hard and not get complacent, I guess would be the right word, where you're just sitting back and letting it cruise and creating that drive. Because then once you get it there, so the last couple of years, you get it to a good point, you remember how hard it was. And then you got to ask yourself, well, if I have explosive growth and growth cost and I make a bad decision and it's not successful, I do not want to go back to where I was in the first 8 years. So then you can easily fall into a fear-based mindset of, okay, well, it's going good. Let me just leave it right here. But for me, not growing and pushing is not a good thing. So to set back, I'm not going to be satisfied with that. Right? Does that make sense?
100%. I mean, honestly, it's crazy listening to you because I can relate a lot with what you're saying. And one thing though, will correct you on and say, you mentioned the first 8 years, but construction takes so much capital to grow, and you know that. Not even just to grow, just to stay alive month to month. It takes so much, overhead. Your overhead's insane in construction, the machinery, the people, the insurance, fuel, everything. But we have a business, Brett, that's 58 years, and in its 54th year, I decided to be like, okay, now I'm third generation. Now it's time to push. We had 3 people working for us. I was one of those 3. My dad was in the office. Like, we had 3 people. And then now last year we were 22, 23 people. And you can have a business that has been around for so long and still put yourself back in that position that you talk about within the first 8 years, because it takes so much. So that's what I like. Like when I sit down with a lot of people or having, people on the podcast and like, with you, like, it's generational, so like there was already a foundation there, and 100%, there was a foundation of the name, but we had 3 people. And in the matter of 3 or 4 years, we ramped up to 22. We bought dump trucks, we bought excavators, we bought dozers, we bought screening equipment, we bought property, millions and millions of dollars, leveraging ourselves. And there was no honeypot of cash, sitting there that we use. We leveraged ourselves like crazy. So I love what you're saying. And all I would say to people too is like, you can have a generational business and you can feel that feeling of like, we have to keep our foot on the gas right now, because if we do not, there's nothing standing here. And I think what actually drove me even more to push through those hard times. Last year was our hardest year in business ever in 58 years. And my dad even can contest to that.
Yeah.
That feeling that we had last year, the feeling of me, third generation, being the face of, well, my grandfather started this and now it's gone. That scared me most. I don't care if I had to go back to the dealership and hand in my excavators or hand in my vehicles. That I don't really care about that, because that's just, what do people think? I don't really care. For me, it was a succession and the legacy of being like, I this up for my grandfather. So that I think can relate to some generational businesses as well. You kind of you get that?
Yeah. Yeah. I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, that's that name, and everybody knows us, and we've always been successful. And 22 years, never been in a lawsuit. And I don't recall of one that my family been in. They never told me anyways. So like you're standing on, even though you're taking it to a new level and I'm taking it to a new level, we're still standing on this mountain that our family built, and you got to protect that. Right. And that's the thing. Like, you don't want to let it go, but then you want to grow. And you want to continue to push because it's fun.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
So
it's a fine balance of doing it, where it makes sense. And I tell you, like, growing and pushing like that was the best lessons I've ever learned in my life. People that I thought were completely irreplaceable and, running operations or running finances, that aren't here anymore. And now our business is, far more profitable. We're running more efficient. You just learn so many valuable lessons over those years, which kind of, I'm curious to know, like, where do you think most business owners in our industry specifically fall? Like, where would be their weaknesses, or where do you see other business owners and you go, I think that's what you're doing wrong? For me, it was putting too much trust into the wrong people, and that's my fault, not theirs. That's mine.
I would say two primary things. First one would be people. I fought it and fought it to get people for cheap. And finally, I just gave up and said, I'm going to have to spend more money, right? If you want good people and you want to win. And we recently implemented traction in our business, and we went through and evaluated every team member to the greatest to the worst. It's a hard conversation. And then you take your greatest and you say, okay, well, what's the attributes of the greatest from the office to the field, all the foremans, everybody? And you take those, say 5, and you say, okay, well, what's their attributes? Because if you could multiply those 5, you could take on anything in this world. And it really comes down to a whole list. But when we looked at every person, their number one attribute of why they're so great is they never make excuses. So then that become a core value and a filter for how we hire people. And if we hire people and you're in an interview and you start making excuses about what happened at the last place, 9 times out of 10, we ain't messing with you. Because you're going to come here and make excuses, right? We don't want excuses. So it doesn't matter if we fail. It doesn't matter if the GC sucks, because most of them do nowadays. And you use that as an excuse. Like, it's just an excuse. It doesn't matter. We're in a contract and we got to continue to push through, right? The other thing I would say is I went back after I got going, I was trying to bid jobs and I didn't know how to estimate. So my first job, I took a set of drawings and I gridded the drawing out and I did cuts and fills in each quadrant and then averaged that. It took me like 6-8 hours. I was like, screw this. So I called Insight and bought Insight and started in takeoffs. That was right after they come off of the, can't remember what those things are called, where you lay them out and draw on the drawings. It was all through PDF. So started doing my takeoffs there. And I'm like, okay, well, now I have my takeoffs done. I know my quantities. I know everything for my bid, but I don't know the numbers on my business. I don't know what it cost. So I started digging into that and I bought my first estimating software probably 2-3 years after that. I had to space it out because I didn't have money. I mean, when I bought my first takeoff software, I think Insight was $7,000 then. Yeah. And then now to go to heavy bid, like, Lord, and we run ag tech and it's outrageous.
Yeah.
It's triple
those.
that. So
Yeah.
anyways, and then I went in and started working through estimating and build my numbers. Well, I didn't know the numbers on my equipment cost. So I'm flying by the seat of my pants. Hourly rates that we used wouldn't work. We're never going to get a job. So then I was coming in high on everything. I'm like, okay, now I got to figure out my cost. So I get rid of QuickBooks, switch to a construction accounting software and start building out my equipment cost. And every piece of equipment is built out. Every mechanic labor hour, every part goes to that piece of equipment. And then we can go back in and take our hours and we can divide by our service labor time, our parts cost, everything to get a real number. And then also that helps me drive the decision of when do I need to replace this equipment.
What's that software?
Foundations. They have an equipment module. So everything goes to every piece of equipment. So I know the costs all the time. So then every year we turn around and we take those numbers and we say, what our equipment costs. So if you're a contractor in the last 3 years, you didn't change your numbers and your estimating program with the new cost today, you're probably losing a lot of money
Or not around.
Right? So we have a very extensive spreadsheet and it's grown over the years. It started with equipment cost, salvage cost, interest, all of your cost. How many hours do I estimate per year that I'm going to use it? Here's my hourly cost, plug my fuel, plug my labor, and let's go. Okay. So now it's transitioned into this huge spreadsheet of, okay, here's our rental rate for that machine. Here's our purchase rate for that machine. And then is it cheaper to rent or is it cheaper to own based off the hours per year that we're using it?
Yeah, the
Utilization. So then this last year, I added our payment amount. Okay. based on the amount of hours it works each month. Okay. And then that determines, is that asset even covering the basis of that? Right. I wouldn't rent my office and not get enough money to cover my basis unless I'm just looking for a long-term investment. But I've got to cover my basis cost. Right. So then you say, okay, well, that, if I work at 160 hours a month and this payment's this much and I'm bidding at this rate, it's never going to pay for itself. It can't even cover its own cost. So it's hard enough to wait 4 months for your paycheck to come in and paying all these people. So I would say the financial, if you're not good at it as a business owner, you need to find somebody that is. You need to find a part-time CFO that will dig into the numbers and will give you the real numbers, because that built a confidence in me going in on these bids that I call it playing the game. When I think about estimating, it's playing a game to me.
Yeah.
And I have a confidence in my numbers. I know my break-even point. I know how low I can go, and then how much can I buy out after I get the job, right? But without that confidence in those numbers and that accounting, it would be a whole different world for me.
Well, you're just shooting from the hip at that point. And we were in that same boat too. We were estimating blind, all right, we really want this job. Put our margins down to 12% on this one. Okay. But then come to figure it and look at it, it's like, okay, well, we just bought an office. We bought this. We're office heavy. We're employee heavy. Well, my overhead's kind of like around 11% right now this year. Shit. Okay. So now I'm doing the job for 1% if everything goes perfect, which, when does that happen? So now it's like, okay, I got 1%. Well, no wonder we're in the position that we're in. So I love what you did. I actually did the same thing. I dove down because I couldn't find that person. And like when I hone in on something, I get addicted to it. And I watched so many YouTube videos on, okay, what's in overhead in construction? How do you calculate your overhead? For me, it was figuring out my overhead was so important, because that, like, if you're pricing a job, gross margins 20%, if your overhead's 11%, well, now you got 9% left of net profit. And like trying to figure out that overhead was so hard. Okay, well, I'm on site sometimes. So how much of my pay gets, split up to being on site or this? Where's the estimator's pay go into? The coordinator? That stuff is all super interesting. And I feel like it's actually, for construction, niche. I don't know if you could share somebody where you learned or something, but mine was just through conversations like this and talking to guys and being like, oh, you put your administrator in, and okay, so you classified her as operational overhead versus, variable overhead. Oh, okay. Like, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't have anybody. In fact, the contractors around here wouldn't even talk to me. I still remember when I first got my utility job, I actually told a kid that I'm helping right now build his business this week. I went to buy some materials at like a lumber store. I saw this other contractor. I've known him years. And I walk up to him and I said, hey, man, I got some questions for you. And I was doing a subdivision. We were putting in a sewer line. And I run over to grab some concrete or something. And I said, I asked some questions. He said, are you laying pipe now? I said, yeah, I am. And he said, that's all we need is another freaking pipe layer in town. And I said, well, can you do every job in Tulsa? He said, no. And I said, when you can do every job in Tulsa, I'll quit. But until then, there's enough work for both of us. And we could probably work together. And when I say this, I don't mean this spitefully, but 2008 hit and he was strictly residential and I was doing a lot of commercial. 2008 hit, his world got rocked. Well, guess what? We ended up working together. And basically that helped me to bring in him to help get some of these commercial jobs going. So we were able to work together anyways. I just don't like that. Like, and I've had a mentor for 10 years and I always think be the mentor you wished you had when you were in that place. Right. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying that I'm going to come in and just share everything with people, but for the most part I will, because my business is going to be different. And I believe that even if I do show it to you and you figure out how I do it, two things are going to happen. You're either going to quit bidding so freaking cheap and we can all make more money, or I'm going to beat you at the game. So either way, like, it's a win-win because we can all win together, but none of us want to like help each other. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to share anything. And it's like, we're all in the same freaking industry and we're just racing to the freaking bottom so that one of us can go bankrupt. Great plan. Let's go. I'm super excited about this guy.
Yeah, I hate that. That's how it is. I mean, especially even right now, it's super competitive and tight. And you're right. It's like it's a race to the bottom. Like, what are we doing? Like during COVID, our dump truck rates actually finally got up to around 125 an hour for a triaxle dump truck go down the road, which still is ridiculously cheap because they're $325,000 to buy, and I can get 135 an hour from a skid steer that costs 120.
Yeah,
Regardless, they were finally going up, and and then things start getting slow again. I'm renting dump trucks at $105 an hour,
exactly.
and I'm like, lads, what are we doing? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense. You blow a tire, you've just lost all your money for the next 2 days, 3 days. Makes no freaking sense. And that's why I said in conversations like this, people need to be more open. And like you said, I don't care about telling people, what I figured out this year as far as what really worked for us to be more profitable and efficient. Because at the end of the day, the secret sauce is me. The secret sauce is my mind and like our team and everybody involved and how we all work in our workflow. So you can share all the info you want, but I'm not worried about somebody coming up on us because they're not us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my equipment, if we were in the same town, you and I would have the same. We're pretty much all buying the same equipment unless you buy used and I buy new. Right. So our rates shouldn't be that big a difference. We're all paying the guys the same because we're all competing for people. Your overhead could be a little bit different, but for the most part, pricing should be pretty close. We bid a job yesterday. It was $1 million spread on a $4 million job.
Wow.
From top to bottom. And in my head, here's where I go today is, okay, it's $4 million job, 2-year project, 5% retainage. They're going to hold 200 grand for 2 years. So if you were low bid on that at 4.1, now you've got 3.9 that you're probably not going to see, and it ain't going to matter when you do get it. Okay. And then you got to be done in about 6-8 months. So you're going to be running, if you run a line of credit, at least $250,000 a month line of credit to keep trucks running and everything. We had 14 trucks figured in it. Okay. So now I'm paying 8-9% on a line of credit right now. So let's just call it 10% for easy number. That's 25 grand a month for the next 6 months. Okay. So 25 grand times 6 and interest charges to cash flow that job to keep it going. Pull that out of your profit. Now what's left? Now that's my basis, right? There's a lot, like you better have some freaking money in that. And to be honest with you, I really don't think people think about that. And I don't think they understand their equipment cost. And that is so important in your business because, I mean, it's hard enough to cash flow it. And then if you're not making any profit, it's just like some of these guys I talk to and they get material quotes in. I said, well, material quotes come with no tax. Well, like tax here is 9%. I said, how much you mark up your materials? 10%. So you're making 1% off your materials? Oh, I'm making 10%. No, you're making 1%. Well, you're not adding tax. You don't have an estimating program that automatically figures tax on materials, right? And they just don't understand it, which I don't mean that bad, but like you've got to dig in and you got to figure it out and you got to understand it. Years ago, and it's probably still out, I don't really need it anymore, but I bought this software. It was like $100 for a lifetime membership. And it's called accountingcoach.com. And really, really drilled into understanding the accounting. And when we built out foundations, when we bought that accounting system, we built our general ledger, built everything out. So now I can see trends. So if I go in there and I look and I see that insurance is 4%, I know on average it should be 2 to 3% of revenue. Then that triggers something for me to dig in and be like, okay, what's going on here?
Nice.
Why is our insurance more? So to find the trends, because your business should be trending, right? Like oil pressure on a dozer runs the same oil pressure, oil temp. When it red flags, then it's either sending you a notification nowadays, but back in the day, you stop and you figure it out, right? Well, I believe that's how our finances should be, right? They should be running consistent the same. And when we start trending off of that percentage of revenue, then dig in, figure it out. Maybe it is what it is, but maybe it ain't, right? Run to it before it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I like that because you're right. Like, I don't have, for me, because, we still use QuickBooks and I spend a lot of my time in my P&L and actually comparing, comparative year from last year to this year. And you're right with the trends because, like, okay, if something shifts here, it should shift here, right? So if you're 12% ahead of revenue, then theoretically your cost of goods sold and your payroll is going to be a little bit higher too. But if your revenue's down and your payroll's up, those are two things. It's like, okay, well, why is there a trend of this going down, but that's going up? Because those two should go up together.
Yep.
Ideally, you could keep them the same and go up on one on revenue, but that's really important. And it's almost like, where did you like? Do you spend your free time? Is there any books or videos or a person? Kind of because like you know a lot about what you're talking about, and understand that you talk with a lot of other people, and maybe you had a mentor. But is there somewhere that you could direct people to be like, ask questions or Google this or read this book or something? Just figure out what you're talking about.
I had a drive to understand it because I knew if I could figure that out, that I could do it. I will say I did not like reading books through school. I didn't like school, but now I've found an interest in reading books, listening to podcasts,
Audiobooks.
Profit First is a really good book. We do that now. So we name our dollars before they come in.
I started reading that. What's your thought on that?
I've been doing about 6-7 years.
Did you ever listen to it the first time and go, I can't do that. This guy doesn't understand. This is bullshit.
Yes, but I don't do it the way he says do it.
Okay.
I do it the way it works for me. Right. And to be honest with you, I'm grateful for it because we picked up a very large job about a year and a half ago when fuel just went crazy. I don't know if it went crazy for you guys.
Oh, yeah.
We picked the job up. We won it in December. We didn't get the contract till May. I think for numbers' sake, I think we had like $85 an hour in for trucking. By the time we started the job, we had, I think it was $110 an hour for trucking. We had 46,000 yards to export. Figure those numbers. Like every week we were rerunning our bid. And honestly, I was at the point where my pride is not too much to pay my bid bond and go on because I need a business, because I have a core value of generational excellence. And that means sometimes I got to make the hard decision for the sake of the business. And I'm not above my pride to take a bid bond. Never have, but I will if I have to. Ended up, it worked out. And I kept fighting through that job and ended up, another contractor, competitor, I just started calling them all. And he needed a bunch of dirt. So he ended up putting 12 trucks on us for almost a month. And I said, I'll tell you what, if you bring the trucks, I'll load you. Let's work together. So he got the dirt, he paid for the trucks, and turned out to be a great job. Right. So, anyways, back to your question. I do read a lot of books. I found that at accountingcoach.com. I spent time with my accountant. I have a part-time CFO now. He retired from Caterpillar. He puts a different spin on numbers for me so we can go back and forth. But honestly, I've always asked other people questions. I don't care if contractors don't want to talk to me or not. I'm not above asking a dumb question. I've been in a mastermind group for about 7 years now with some other business guys. So you learn from them. I've had a mentor for about 10 years, and he's really pushed me to always be growing, always be learning, always be understanding. I would say at the end of the day, you have to have a passion for it. You don't have a passion for it. And the funny thing is, a lot of business owners I think you talk to that I know, they don't even want to know all that. So I think for me, it's a little bit different. But if you don't like it and you're not going to be consistent with it, go find somebody that can do it right. That can help you walk through it. So I tell a lot of guys, like, I used to have QuickBooks, so I understand QuickBooks. And it's like, they say, well, should I go buy foundations? No, don't buy foundations. Just set up a project for every piece of equipment you have and have your guys clock into that. Put all your parts towards that. You're getting the same thing I'm getting in my system. You're just doing it on a project level in QuickBooks. So then you can track your costs. So you can do a profit and loss on that specific job, which is that piece of equipment. It's going to be at a loss, but it tells you. And then you do cost codes in there for parts, for preventative maintenance, and then for mechanic time. And there you go. Take that total cost, divide it by your yearly hours, and now you got your number for what it costs you based on these hours per year. And now you got a number to run with.
I feel like I should have had a notepad written down for this podcast. This is good, man. It's crazy because I kind of feel like maybe we're the same. Like I didn't have a choice. We tried to find, somebody to do financials and a controller / CFO, and just couldn't find a person that worked. And I had no choice, last winter to then just dedicate my time when wintertime we're slow to just learn it, figure it out, get in QuickBooks, figure out our true costs, do exactly everything that you're saying. Start reading books, Profit First, how to buy back your time, like a bunch of these really, good reads. And it's really important. But I love like everything that you're saying. Like it's crazy that I feel like I'm like, if somebody talked to me that doesn't know, I'd be like, okay, I could share you a lot of info that I learned that's valuable. But then you talk to somebody like yourself and what you just said at the end, it's like, yeah, I didn't even know I could utilize QuickBooks like that. I'm just using it as look at my profit and loss after the numbers are already all plugged in. I don't look at it. I don't set up a project and do that. I look at that from our project management software and then the hours. And then we look at what we estimated and go, all right, well, did we make money on this? But you can dive even further into it, which is so cool.
Which, to be honest with you, I didn't do that when I had QuickBooks. And I didn't really think about it that way until I bought Foundations. And then after I bought Foundations and I saw what Foundations did, and I started building all these cost classes for all these different pieces of equipment, then I said, you know what, I could have done this. But switching to Foundations kind of expanded my knowledge and to say, you know what, it doesn't always have to be in a new program. Can I build it within what I have now? And like I said, I believe you can. So, and you just go with it. It won't be, I can click and run my report right now, and you'd have to run a specific report, but you can do selective in QuickBooks and pick all those jobs. And now I have a total equipment cost. For a while, I did what's called equipment contra account. So equipment contra account takes your estimated rate of all your equipment. So if I have 20 pieces of equipment and they're $100 an hour, takes all that cost, puts it into that contra account, and then it deducts it out of that contra account. So you can go in and you can say, okay, I'm estimating that all my equipment per year cost me $400,000. And then you go over and you look at your equipment cost, actual equipment cost, and say, okay, is my estimating numbers overall lined up with my actual numbers? And if it lines up, I would say you're probably going to get within 20%, 30%, because there's just so many variables for us, then I'm good. But if my numbers are 50 to 80% off, then either I'm too low or I'm way too high and I'm got opportunity cost I'm missing. So then I can start working back through those numbers. This is just years and years of really like having a desire to dig into the numbers. And honestly, I can't find a lot of people that really go that deep with it. And I be honest with you, sometimes I think I go too deep. Too much information can honestly kind of deflect you from being more risky. So my mentor always says, what do you know that you're acting like you don't know? And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So then you go and you start building these jobs and you know your cost. And I'm not kind of countercultural, but if I didn't know it, I could wing it more, and I'm okay with that. But now that I know it and I know what I'm going to get into, if I get a $4 or $5 million job like we did yesterday, then I can't unsee it. And then I can't lie to myself just to go buy that job to be not profitable at the end of it, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So it can be challenging as well.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And it's interesting because, we always run, like I always like saying, for me, we have different dynamics in the office, like my dad, he had 3-4 employees his, entire 40-year span of running the business. And he did very well. We had a great childhood and everything, but he never had that, the growth mindset of like, he never wanted to expand or he never wanted to grow because he's like, man, I don't need to, I'm good, whatever. And I always like saying, kind of what you were saying at the end, is scared money don't make money. And that's why sometimes maybe knowing exactly everything isn't always the best, because then you might be a little more conservative with, how you're going to spend that dollar.
Yeah, 100%. My dad's the same way. He thought I was crazy when I started buying all the software and all that. The other thing I'd say back to your question is in my 20s, I had high blood pressure. I was always pissed, fired people for nothing. I mean, you show up 5 minutes late, fire you, make an example in front of everybody, which is not right. And to be honest with you, I really, really hated my life in my 20s. And I just thought I got to change this because this is not what I thought business would be. And that's when I went out to Entree Leadership, and I don't necessarily agree with their financial side of things. They say debt free, and that's really hard in our business. But their leadership is very good, and I have to say that I changed who I am and wanting people to be like me, and letting people's gifts in this business be their gift, and identifying where I suck and let them win at it. Because I can manage everything. I can bid, I can project manage, I can run all the equipment, I can do all that. But if I'm touching everything on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being great, it's all at a 4 or 5. But if I bring in an estimator and he's killing it, now it's at an 8. I bring in a PM, now it's at an 8, right? And then accounting, which I love the numbers and I love everything we talked about, but I hate accounting.
Mhm.
I want to run a report and I want to play with the numbers and play the game, right? So I don't like that. And to be honest with you, if I had to do the bookkeeping, we'd probably be bankrupt.
Yeah.
It's leukemia to my soul. So identifying people and then leaning into their gifts instead of expecting them to work the way I do things, right? I don't need a list. I don't want to sit down and make a list. I don't want all these details. They make fun of me here because when I bid jobs, I do lump sums. I'd take a material quote and put it in as a lump sum. Would win the job. I'd hand off the job to the foreman and be like, here it is. Here's your material list. Here's the numbers. Get after it. Now it's all detailed. They know exactly what they got on the job. So they kind of make fun of me here about all my lump sums that I put in bids.
What was it in your 20s that why were you the way you were? And then I guess like what made you realize you wanted to change? Is it because you're like, man, I hate who I am right now? You woke up one day and you're like, this sucks for myself and everybody around me.
I mean, I was an ass.
Was it money though? Was it fine? Like, it was because you were struggling and you were getting started and you're like, I just can't get ahead, and that just wore on you?
Well, my dad's hardcore. And I had a saying, you didn't make me and you won't break me. I didn't care. Fire customers. I don't know. I was chasing money. I had run for years and years and years broke, just trying to survive, right? So I'm sure the stress, but I'm never one to say I'm stressed. I don't know how to know when I'm stressed. It's just life. And then when I went to that conference, I met my mentor there. And I said, will you mentor me? Because I'd read some books about leaders that always have mentors in their life. And he said, no, it's long distance. He's from Nashville. And I think that was in May when I went. November, I hired him. And he's been my mentor for 11 years now.
Wow.
We talk every Tuesday. It changed to Thursday for a while, but every Tuesday from 7 to 8. He knows my wife. He knows my kids. He knows most of the people in my business. And I had to fill out a progress report every week. And it's, what did you achieve since we last talked? What did you intend to do but didn't do? What business or personal opportunities are in front of you? What do I need to know? And what else do I need to know? So if you think about this, I've got 11 years of weekly progress reports. I go back to some of them sometime. And here's what I found. I constantly bitched about employees and what they're not doing. Here's what he did. He put a mirror in my face and said, what are you doing? The truth of the matter is I wasn't equipping them with the tools to be successful. And what I had to realize is this all falls back on me. And the image I have in my head of it is you got this battery, right? And it's got 14 volts coming out of it. And I'm the battery. And how am I charged well enough to push out through this circuit system, this wiring harness to all these different things? And there was no voltage coming out of me, right? I wasn't pushing things where they needed to go, and I wasn't doing what I needed to do. And then honestly, getting past arrogance, pride, admitting the fact that I'm wrong, admitting the fact that I can't do these things well, and to bring the right people in that can help me do it well. So that's been ongoing. It's a new world today talking to him, but almost every time he would turn that back to be my fault, right? So And then there again, asking the questions. What do you know that you're acting like you don't know? Asking a question to really make a statement. You go out and you ask one of your guys in the field, you're going to move that topsoil, right? So, and the truth is like, they're going to move it, but you're just asking the question to make a statement. Just make the freaking statement. Because the great people in our business want to be told straight up, right? And if you don't tell them straight up, I don't think they're going to respect you. Respectfully set them straight, right? So he helped me through that. And I had some difficulties with my dad. I would say for the first 5 years, I don't know. He, even though I had my own business, he still wanted to have a lot of say in the things I was doing. And as a young man, I was building my own way. And I'll be honest with you, it made a very, very difficult situation. We have a great relationship now. And to be honest with you, I wanted nothing to do with him. And Aaron kept telling me, he said, one day you're going to bury your dad and you can't go back and replace it. You need to learn how to deal with this. And we've restored that. I think there was some anger in that too, because we're all men. We all want that attaboy from our dad. We want our dad to be proud of us, right? And when you don't get that, I think it becomes an internal issue.
Yeah, I was the same as well. My dad, like, it's funny because if my dad ever says proud of you or good job, my response is, how much have you had to drink today?
Yeah,
He doesn't have a drinking problem or anything, but generally, if my father ever gave me a pat on the back, he's a hard guy, assuming kind of the same temperament as your old man. And it's like, that doesn't say that sort of stuff unless he's got maybe a scotch or two in him. And it's like, I'm proud of you. But I was the same thing, man. And I think that's the thing with family business as well, too, is like, I remember when I first came into it and I told him, I said, I'm either going to work with you and grow this business or I'm going to work against you and take work from you. And I remember parking the dump truck on the side of the road and calling my wife and saying, come pick me up at the office. I just gave my dad an ultimatum. And that was the day. The next day, he came over. We fought about it. And the very next day is when I started in the office and I got off the site because I'm like, Dad, I can't build the business from sitting in a machine all day. I need to go out and talk to people, and we need to hire estimators. And that was kind of the turning point. So it's kind of interesting because you kind of went through and kind of did the same thing. And our family and business, those two things, definitely, they can be the biggest blessing, but they also can be the most painstaking, crazy thing of your life ever.
Yeah. And we do the same thing. So there's still, we were always respectful to each other because people would call me trying to call him. And I'm like, no, you need to call him. Like there was always respect there. On certain jobs, it got to the point where I was doing different stuff. So it didn't really matter. So we knew if somebody was trying to get a hold of him and they were trying to get a hold of me. But now today, he's kind of shut down and he still has people call him. So I said, well, if you get a job, we'll just give you a percentage of it. Roll on. So now he's actually selling jobs. And then we can turn around and give him a percentage for the sales and go on. And he gets to enjoy, he's got cattle and does some ranching and things like that. So it works out good. I would say put your family over business because you can do it the other way. And I think that's a bad thing because when all the business is gone, any one of us can go out of business today and all that's left is our family. So you and your dad doing good now?
100%. I think best thing for me, I was the same. Early 20s, hothead. Nothing was going to stop me. Had a different temperament. And, finding my wife, we've been together for 8 years, married for 2, having kids, buying a house, growing up, being a man, that kind of brought me closer to my father. And especially even just in the past 3 years, having grandkids. My dad's a better grandfather than he was dad. He's the best, grandparent to my kids. So it's good now, but I would agree with what you said. It took me a while to sit back and realize, like, okay, if everything's all left, I still need my family. And you can't turn your back on that. It is super important. And I tell everybody, I used to hide the fact that my dad was in the business because I was embarrassed when I was younger, right? Because, you're the boss's son, right? You're the silver spoon, you're third generation.
Same here.
And I hated that. And I actually used to call him Dave because I didn't want to say dad. So then I went through a part where I'd say old man. And then he's like, don't call me old man. Like, call me dad. I'm your dad. And then finally, I was like, you know what? I was trying to hide the fact that my dad was in business with me and that he was a big role in the business. And then now I'm like, it is such a blessing that I get to go to work every single day. I get to see my father sitting in his office. Like, when he's dead and gone, I'm going to be wishing that I had more time like that. And I think of that stuff now that I have kids.
I always ask myself, will I remember this in 10 years?
Yeah.
If he says something, because he'll still make comments, piss me off.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, well, I remember this in 10 years. And if I won't, let it freaking go. You know what I mean? And I still have, I respect him. It doesn't matter how old I am, all that. So it's a good place now, but I'm grateful that I'm not in that role with him. And that we can have that relationship. So it's awesome to you that you're protecting that.
Yeah.
Because it can get the other way in a hurry, you know?
Yeah, man, 100%. It definitely can be crazy, but I don't also want to take up too much of your time. I know that we've been on here a bunch and you're busy and you got a lot going on. And I want to thank you, man, for coming on the podcast today and talking and saying everything that you said. I love how easy the conversation was with you. And, I definitely think so many people are going to pull a lot of value out of this.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate being on with you guys.
Yeah.
I was excited. I took the month off in July, and I got back and got the invitation. I was like, man, I hope I didn't miss that because this will be fun. I love ConAg.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you're there in 2026.
We will be. I've been to every one of them for like the last, I don't know how many years. I was there in COVID, so got to watch it shut down.
No. We'll stay in touch then, and I'd love to, have a beer or, come see you in 2026 when you're at the show.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the time.
Appreciate it, man. This podcast is brought to you by our good friends over at Komatsu. Thank you, Bret, for coming on. Have a good one.